Hello and welcome to PGurus channel. I'm your host Sri Iyer. Please pardon me for the shadows my face is casting. I'm trying my best to try and see if I can make a better light. I hope this is better than what it was. Today I have a guest who is joining us for the first time. But before I introduce him, let me give you a little bit of a backdrop about what we are talking about today. Now, for the longest time, panel speakers who have joined PGurus have mentioned about the thriving ecosystem of the left in many universities. Today, we are going to see up close and personal how these things are evolving, how the universities are trying to combat this, whether they have been successful or not, to really get to the bottom of the matter here. And for that, we picked two universities of England, the two premier institutes, Oxford and Cambridge. And with us is Dr Mrutyunjaya Mazumdar, who is a scientist today. He has finished his PhD in physics. He is with Cambridge, and he's going to explain to us his experiences. He's a very active student leader there when he was a student. And we join him today. Mrittunjoy, welcome to PGurus channel. And how's the weather up there?
Thank you. Thank you so much. The weather, well, is slightly cloudy at the moment, and I mean, you know, a little gloomy as well. But it is what it is. It's British weather for you.
Yes, yes. So you know, when I was following the I think it was 1999 World Cup, and they said, you know, how do you predict the weather in London? So the prediction goes like this: if it is not raining, it is going to rain soon.
Yes. Well, I learned that very early on when I was in England. You know, it can just start anytime. So yeah, one has to be prepared.
All right. So Mrittunjoy, why don't you share with us your, you know, education, upbringing, and so on and so forth, up until now as to what you're doing, and then we can get into our topic.
Yeah. Well, so I did my graduation from St. Stephen's College in Delhi. In physics, BSc Honors
Stephanian.
Physics. Yes.
I can see a certain shampoo boy's ears perk up.
Then I did my master's in physics at the Cavendish Laboratory in Cambridge, and that was after that I continued over for my PhD, which I completed in around 2 years, 11 months last year.
Oh, that was amazing. 2 years, 11 months. Amazing.
Yes, and I finished that last year. And then I continued over for my postdoctoral research. Currently, I'm working with Professor Brian Josephson in unification physics and looking at the various kinds of symmetries in physics as well. On the side, besides my academics, I have been very active in the university space with various societies. I have been with the Cambridge University India Society, various other societies, and also active in the student unions as well. And even in St. Stephen's College and thereafter in Cambridge, I have been a student union leader. In Cambridge, I have been elected 4 times. This was the last term was my 4th term as an elected student representative. And it is during this period that I kind of found some, you know, unpleasant realities of the space, of the university space. Not necessarily the institution itself, but a certain culture that pervades that space, so to say. And that is what has been concerning and, you know, that I would like to share today.
Wonderful. And that was a very crisp introduction. I wish I were as crisp as you, Mrittunjoy. I've been at this for a few years now, and I'm still trying to perfect my art. So Mrittunjoy, so you started out in St. Stephen. So were you born in Delhi, or did you grow up in some other place?
Well, I mean, I was born in New Haven, Connecticut, in the United States.
I see. So are you a US citizen? Are you a US citizen now?
Not at the moment, because I have the Indian passport now. So I was brought up in Delhi, and my father was on a fellowship back then in '93 when I was born, and thereafter I was raised in India, in Delhi, and I continued from education there itself.
I see. Wonderful, wonderful. So when you came to Cambridge, and you said that for the 4th year as being part of the student body that you started looking, sensing some unpleasant realities. So maybe you can just walk us through 1 or 2 experiences. I think what we are trying to say here is that, you know, there is a truth, and
Yeah.
there is a version of the truth that gets peddled,
Yes.
and we want to try
Yes.
and help people discern between the two.
Yes, yes, absolutely. So the thing is, previously there was so in Cambridge University we have the student unions, which have 7 primary student leaders,
Mm-hmm.
and they are at various positions like women's officer, international officer, and so on. Previously, I was associated with the graduate union and the Cambridge University Student Union in various capacities. But this year, I was the vice president and the chair of the executive committee of the graduate union, which is a fairly kind of it's a primary position in the university space, in the student union space. And in that capacity, I got to interact with a lot of activists and students during my time there. I was on various university committees, including committees like the Graduate Tutors Committee, Finances Committee, and so on, various committees. Now, the problem which came about was when I got close to some of these groups and learned about the ways in which the regressive left, as I call it, there are certain lobbies and certain groups which are active in the university space, how they function. And by that, what I mean is they have resources with them. They pride themselves on having spies in every colleges, like who are informers of sorts. And they also pride on the fact that they have enough clout to kind of show their opposition to any particular person or group with a lot of impact, so much so that they cannot even function properly, essentially. That's what I kind of got from my interaction there. But in terms of particular events, I think there are things which I did which were very pro-India, even pro-Hindu in some ways. And that was something I did as a natural, as a citizen myself, things which I have been interested in. And it is there that I have been opposed on various fronts. This includes things like, for instance, I'll give you a few examples here. There were instances where I was charged with being fascist, quote unquote fascist, when I stood up for my country on Independence Day, for instance. I was one of the student leaders to join in the Independence Day celebration at the India High Commission on 15th of August. And we had a lot of opposition and protest on that day, as was probably publicized in various platforms, which became pretty ugly, essentially. There were protesters from around 5,000 of them, according to police reports, who did things like hurling eggs and tomatoes and bottles at people, be it women, children, or elders. I was there for the 3 hours which it happened. It was a very kind of harrowing
Where
experience.
was this? Where did the
in London,
in London?
In
okay.
London, yeah.
Okay.
And I went there, and I was right on the front line. So there was this BBC reporter who apparently took a picture with me and the national flag at the back. And she put it on Twitter, and thereafter the Cambridge crowd, the Cambridge community took onto that, latched onto that, and instead of just understanding what the reality of the celebration was, which was that it was a cultural celebration of India's Independence Day. There were students from schools who had come to perform dance performances and so on. They made it seem like it was a political rally or an event of sorts, and then started defaming. And it became extremely unpleasant when online and offline people were tagging me in certain ways, which obviously was not fair because that was not representative of the truth. And that went about for a while. On that same day, I also unfurled the national tricolour, the flag, in the Parker's Pieces, which is a historic ground in Cambridge, where they say that modern football was born. That was where the rules of modern football were first implemented.
You mean soccer, right? You mean soccer, right?
Soccer, yes, English football, essentially. Yeah.
Right.
And there, with a few students, I kind of unfurled the national tricolour. There were some people who gave some speeches. So it was a very nice, good event for identifying with India and being proud of our heritage. And even that was opposed in the most unpleasant of ways, where they said that somebody who can unfurl the flag a few days after the abrogation of 370 is again fascist and very intolerant and so on. There were various terms used which are so unpleasant that I wouldn't even like to probably share them on a public domain. Besides that, there were instances with Balakot, for instance, when there was the surgical strike to eliminate certain non-state actors spreading terror, and I spoke up in support of that as well in the university space. and so on. There were various other events. But the things took a very ugly turn when things became official in a certain way. There was a harassment charge that was filed against me by a certain activist group. And I'm very sensitive and aware of the nitty-gritties of such cases, and that if genuine, they should be addressed in the appropriate manner. But in this case, I was fairly certain that there wasn't one, and it was very unpleasant because for 3 months I had to face a lot of kind of opposition from various people in very subtle ways at times, and very unpleasant ones. And that went on for 3 months. There was an investigation, and then I was absolved of all the charges. But the damage had been done already in terms of reputation. And what I'm trying to get across is that there are various subtle and indirect ways in which these groups and this entire group of people kind of gets things done. Essentially, it tries to suppress opposition. It tries to look at things which are very, very harrowing in some ways. And this also affected, later on, this is independent of this also affected university committees. So I was working with the equality and diversity team of Cambridge University. And when my participation, there was a participation in a certain public event where I was supposed to speak. And that went out to some of these academics and certain groups out there. They made a huge hue and cry about it. They wrote Facebook posts, and even apparently approached the team as well to not have that event. And thereafter, the event was actually postponed indefinitely. So I wasn't able to participate because my term was coming to an end very soon. And it again was very unfortunate, because if the university committee itself can be influenced, that is fairly unfortunate in a certain way. And most recently, I agreed to host Vivek Agnihotri, the Indian director and spokesman for various things.
Files and
Tashkent Files and Urban Naxals, yes. And I was asked to kind of host him, and I was like, sure, let us do this, because there are some views which I wanted him to share with people out there, and then have a debate of sorts with the university community. And it was very unfortunate that although the event itself didn't happen because of logistical reasons, but there was an Eventbrite poster which had gone up, and these groups again latched onto that, and they made a an official complaint to the union, saying that we would like to speak up against fascist voices and not platform such people, quote unquote. It was unfortunate because they had projected it in a way which was not entirely representative of the truth. Again, because we were wanting to have an interaction which would be well-paced and which would be on various points which are relevant to the topic, or the various topics that he has kind of represented over the years. And even the fact that the event itself was opposed shows a certain disregard for the freedom of expression that is maintained as a core value of these spaces. It was almost hitting away at the premise that the exchange of ideas could happen in a safe space, so as to have opposition or support depending on the merit of what is being shared. And that was what really kind of showed that ugly side in stark contrast. It showed it in as much of clarity as there could be. But the worst part was when my contract, my association with the graduate union was terminated 13 days before the end of my term. And although I was already on leave, my last working day was on the 15th of December. On the 18th of December, I was sent a termination letter saying that I had revealed certain sensitive information, which was not entirely true. I had written a blog post about the ways in which harrowing and bullying had happened in the year, across the year, and I had appealed, but the appeal has also been unfairly squashed based on the fact that I haven't produced new evidence, when I always said that it was on the existing evidence that I want to kind of base my appeal on, because there are things which have been disregarded or not entirely kind of understood or represented. And the thing is that it's very unfortunate, because I'm an international student. I'm coming back to India soon, and I obviously have limited resources, which is why I probably cannot go for a long-drawn legal battle. It almost seems like that was always, there somewhere in the mind of these people when they lodged this complaint and escalated it to the point where now it has reached student media, and there have been news articles on Varsity, which is a very famous newspaper of Cambridge. A few of the articles have gone out there, and the worst part is that they haven't even asked for given me a right to response, in the sense that one of the articles went out before I could even give my comments, which is by any standard journalistic practice, that is what is followed. And there is this entire smear campaign of sorts which is going out there. It's very unfortunate because I have worked so hard for the 5 years in various capacities in the university, and if this is the way that my student term kind of comes to an end, it's speaking a lot about how regressive this entire thing is.
It is very regrettable out this part, so no worries.
Yeah,
no
yeah,
worries.
yeah,
Okay.
yeah.
So so if I understand you correctly, you're headed back home and you're going to
Yes.
start a new life in India. And perhaps you can share a little bit about the composition of these groups. Are they
Yes.
mostly of Indian origin or South Asian, or are they from all over the world? Is it native British people also with the left mindset? There's nothing wrong in having a certain ideology,
Yes. Yeah.
mindset and ideology, as long as
Yeah.
you give a chance for the other person to express
Yes.
their views. It seems to
Yes.
me that as a student body, Cambridge is a responsible university, and
Yes.
your experience, I want parents who really take pride in sending their children. They spend their hard-earned savings
Absolutely.
on trying to take them to the
Absolutely.
top
Yes.
universities.
Yes.
Cambridge is but an example. What's happening is actually playing out in many other prestigious universities as well.
Yes.
And so perhaps you can share a little bit about the composition of these groups. Do they ever graduate, or are they like permanent students like they are in JNU?
So the thing is, in Cambridge, they are from various nationalities. There is obviously an Indian group as well, and I wouldn't like to take names of universities necessarily, but I'm sure your viewers know which universities particularly they are from, and they do come here, and there is a certain kind of coterie. There is a certain group which is very clannish in a certain way. They kind of come together and organize and mobilize, and it's not only Indians. There are various others as well. In this recent campaign, there are people from other nationalities who have been at the forefront even. And the idea being that they want to stifle certain kinds of ideas and concepts. And what they feel they are stifling is fascism, that is what they say, or various other terms that they use, is buzzwords that they use. But they don't care to engage and understand the side necessarily completely. Because, for instance, I myself have had certain left libertarian kind of ideas and policies which I have supported, for instance in terms of progressive taxation or certain other ideas, but I'm also very Indian, like very strongly kind of patriotic in that sense. I have a dharmic side. I like to speak about philosophy and the heritage of India, for instance. And I think what they do not like is when one sides in any shape or form with certain establishments, be it the current government of India, certain policies that have gone out. For instance, they had an anti-CAA protest. They had things against the Ram Mandir judgment as well, which I opposed particularly because we had a debate in Cambridge which was on the legality and validity of the Ayodhya judgment. And thankfully, and surprisingly, we won that debate, representing the Indian government and the side that won the judgment as well. But they have been trying all kinds of ways to kind of put down these key aspects and voices in the university space. And there's not only me, but I have seen it happen with various others who have tried to stand up as well. And they just want to put forth a discourse, a certain kind of a narrative essentially, which is a certain way. And the best part for them is that they control the student media. They have people in various national dailies whom they can kind of approach and present that particular aspect. But this other side, which always remains hidden, is never represented all that much. And this has happened even with people from other countries as well. There are people who have stood up for certain key aspects and ideas, and they have been squashed in various ways as well. So I wouldn't like to go so far as to condemn Cambridge entirely as an institution, and people who would like to come to the university. I mean, I will always say that it is a really good place for academics and research. But at the same time, I wanted to speak up against this very hidden kind of culture that pervades there, which one doesn't even get to see as a student, but only when you reach a position of, let's say, a student representative or a certain place in the university, you do get to see glimpses of this quote unquote beast that they have in the university space. So yeah.
Now, there are two ways to look at this. One is
Yeah.
that the management, that is the university regents, scholars,
Yeah.
all the people who run the university affairs,
Yeah.
that they need to show that people who come out of Cambridge are
Yes.
well heeled, even
Yes.
in terms of like they understand the left, they understand the right. They are being shown the facts from left and right, and they are
Yes.
free to make their own judgments as to where their ideology leans. Now, in all these things, see what happens is if a certain side is almost always getting the upper hand, surely the people who are running the state of affairs, they should also be concerned a little bit. What are your thoughts on that?
Yes. Well, I think so. So I'd first like to mention that the student unions, have been registered as independent charities. So although they are associated with the university, but they're independent charities. So in that respect, the university has limited control over the way they kind of function.
Mm-hmm.
Having said that, I do agree with what you have said, because I think it is the responsibility of the management to see that it doesn't get skewed so much. Because now what is happening is that there is almost a peer pressure of sorts to conform to certain things. At times, the undergrads are like, this is trendy, this is the way things are, this is what people are kind of believing in. And I see that people who may be on the fence, or who may not be that political or naturally oriented towards being very assertive, may be led down a certain path because of the culture and the environment that is there in Cambridge. And as I mentioned earlier, the worst part was when the university committee was influenced into postponing the event that I mentioned. That was not representative of a very kind of liberated space, so to say, because they always pander about liberation and various other buzzwords again. I don't think it's entirely liberated in that sense, because they're not standing up for truth, they're not standing up for free speech and an open exchange of ideas. So I think that's a very valid point that you mentioned out there.
Well, Mrittunjoy, as you get ready to embark on your life in India, I hope you all the best, and I hope to see you on the political, political wavelengths in India, taking an active part in politics. I mean, it's clear that you are very passionate about, India and the Sanatana Dharma that you and I belong, as a matter of fact.
Yes.
And I'm actually a late bloomer. I never participated in any of the student events and committees. I was never a part of any political infrastructure. But some bloom early, some bloom late. So let's just put it that way. So now, whatever you said about Cambridge, can we say that the same applies to Oxford, or is Oxford perhaps even worse?
Well, I mean, I have had limited interaction with the student union leaders there, but I mean, by the fact that there is an existence of the bodies and the groups that I spoke about in Oxford as well, I would go so far as to say yes, maybe that maybe there is this culture as bad as it is in Cambridge in some ways. It's just that people don't speak up against it. It's often because of the fear of being squashed in the way that I have been, for instance, where one blog post was tagged as incendiary and was used as the reason for the dismissal, the unfair dismissal that has happened. And I'm sure there are others who would like to speak up but never get the opportunity, or never have the courage to stand up to this huge group of people who have systematically tried to suppress these voices, essentially.
In fact, this system is fairly powerful, and they have also infiltrated, social media organizations. And I was just speaking to a friend of mine who's a career journalist for 15 plus years, and all he said was pointed out the hypocrisy of a certain Bollywood actress. and Twitter has immediately suspended him for 12 hours, saying that you should not
Wow,
have said
right.
this. I mean, this was
Yes.
not even like, he was not even taking names, and he just tagged a person. That doesn't mean that it was that person, but if that
Yeah.
person wants to extend his tag Twitter to herself and complain about it, that's her problem. But
Absolutely.
what you're seeing now is that despite all these things, despite all these
Yeah.
tools, despite all this,
Yes.
varnishing the whole truth with their own flavor, they
Yes.
are continuously starting to lose. They're lost
Yes.
2 times in India.
Yes.
They've
Yes.
lost. What conservatives came back to power, right?
Yes.
David
Yes.
Cameron had a
In
bigger
yes.
mandate. Uh,
Yes.
Theresa May a little bit less, but now again this guy has a really good mandate. So,
Absolutely. Yes.
I'm hoping that this sort of reality starts, trickling down into the university ecosystems also,
Yes.
because
Yes.
today's students in Oxford and Cambridge are the best and the brightest for England for
Yes.
tomorrow's leadership. So let's hope that
Absolutely.
this epiphany starts spreading. I mean, there are some 30, 40-year-old labor constituencies that have turned conservative this
Yes.
in this
Yes.
election,
Yeah.
and that is a huge wake-up call for these people, where
Yes.
ideology is probably bankrupt. If I,
Yes.
a very kind way to say that. I mean, I think I can think of many other words to describe it, but but
Well, I think you're absolutely right, because this time the Labour Party has lost seats like Bolsover, which is a seat that they lost in 1979 or so, like 50
yes,
years back, 49 years back. The point that, although, is that there are some key ideas which are very good in principle. There are things like egalitarianism and welfare state, but the problem right now is the way and the structuring that has happened, and the way in which it is presented in a very utopian fashion, and which is not realistic in various ways. And as you used the word bankrupt, I mean, I wouldn't go so far, but I would say that yes, I mean, there are things which have to be done differently. Otherwise, they're fairly politically irrelevant in various places, unfortunately or fortunately. And I think they see the university space as a safe space to show their domineering nature, because they all of them, many of them are there in that space. So they don't have much opposition from any other side. There isn't any other side all that much, which is why they can completely show their clout and their influence and get whatever they want done essentially out there. And I do hope that the students, when they see the larger world, they do take the initiative to kind of break through that. I mean, I'm not saying that the left should be completely rejected, or the right should be completely accepted, or vice versa. It's just that it has to be an informed choice. It has to be an independent choice based on one's own tendencies and thoughts and ideas. Essentially, that is what is most important.
yes, and I wish you all the best, Mrittunjoy, and
Thank you.
viewers. This is, they couldn't, conquer or defeat Mrittunjoy using facts,
Yes.
so they use some very questionable methods, in my opinion, to try and get around this whole thing. It's very, very sad. This is not the last you heard of it. I'm sure we're going to have more discussions on this one, because
Yeah.
this shows that now their castle of ideology is crumbling. That's why I say
Yes.
ideologically bankrupt. And I also say that because China is communist in name only,
Yeah. Yeah.
right?
Absolutely.
Right?
Yes.
So that is the takeaway here. That
Yeah.
yes, democracy is not the most perfect, but of all the bad systems, this is the least
Yeah.
bad.
Yeah. Yeah.
And and
Absolutely.
and,
And
and
yeah.
go ahead.
Yeah, no, I think that's a very valid point. But I think I would also like to say that I don't think they have tried their best to kind of break me. That's the only word I think I can think of. But it's also because of my heritage, my dharma, as you mentioned, and a certain inner strength, thankfully, by God's grace, that I haven't kind of crumbled. Even now, they have tried their level best to kind of show their hatred on Twitter, Facebook, in WhatsApp groups, the way they kind of present certain, things and facts. But it hasn't broken me at all. I mean, I'm as strong and, vocal about my opinions. And I'm proud in a very kind of humble way as well, that I have been able to stand up for this, because I think India represents Indian heritage, the Indic civilization represents a certain strength and self-belief, but not necessarily the parochial and petty ways in which this has been done. And I'm happy that I have been able to reflect that in the University of Cambridge.
Absolutely, and we wish you all the best, Mrittunjoy, and we will be having more interactions with you in the days to come. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Shreya. Yeah, thank you.